Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a truly heavy subject from American history, the lynching of Black people.
Yes, we'll be working from an article that really digs into its origins, the key events, the impact, and importantly, its legacy.
It's definitely sensitive material, incredibly difficult, but something we absolutely need to understand.
Exactly.
Our goal here is to pull out the most critical insights, where this came from, the major turning points, and how it still resonates today to give you a clearer understanding, even though it's a painful one.
And it's important to start by saying lynching wasn't just spontaneous anger. The article points out how it grew from earlier forms of control in colonial times, initially aimed at enslaved Africans.
But the shift after the Civil War during Reconstruction, that's where it becomes this very specific tool of racial terror, right?
Precisely. That's the chilling transformation.
Okay, let's unpack that. So Black Americans start gaining some rights, voting, holding office.
Right, some socio-political progress.
And the article stresses how white supremacist groups, well, like the Ku Klux Klan, deliberately used lynching to roll back those gains, to try and force things back to how they were before the war.
Yes, absolutely. It wasn't random prejudice. It was a calculated strategy, political and social repression.
Wow. A deliberate tool to create fear.
Widespread fear in the Black population, yes, and to reinforce that racial hierarchy. And you really can't separate this from the Jim Crow laws.
Okay, so the laws that enforced segregation and inequality.
Exactly. They created the legal and social framework, the environment where this kind of racial terror could just flourish.
So the system itself almost enabled it.
Yeah.
The article suggests Jim Crow laws pushed this idea of Black inferiority, making the violence seem almost justifiable to some.
That's a key point in the article, yes.
Yeah.
Deeply ingrained racism, a culture that accepted violence against Black people, compounded, the article notes, by economic factors, too.
Economic factors, how so?
Well, lynching often targeted Black individuals based on false accusations, maybe perceived threats, or even just economic competition. It was a way to keep Black communities down, economically speaking, marginalized.
That's horrifying. Being targeted just for, trying to succeed or challenging the power structure?
Mm-hmm.
The article then shifts to some key events. And the name Emmett Till, it just jumps right out.
Yes, 1955. What makes Till's case so pivotal, and the article really highlights this, is the sheer brutality. A 14-year-old boy, and then his mother, Mamie Till. Her incredibly brave decision.
The open casket funeral.
Exactly. To force the world to see the reality of this violence. It was a powerful, undeniable act.
It really forced a national conversation, didn't it? This horrific murder, supposedly for offending a white woman.
And then the acquitter of his murderers.
Right. The article frames this as igniting massive outrage, really fueling the civil rights movement. It just laid bare the impunity.
Absolutely. And building on that, the article brings up the Scottsboro Boys case from 1931.
9 Black teenagers in Alabama falsely accused of rape.
Yes. And the article uses this to show the systemic injustice. Convictions by all white juries, despite evidence they were innocent. The retrials.
It went on for years, didn't it? Really exposed the flaws in the legal system concerning race. The article mentions the NAACP, the International Labor Defense. Their involvement brought international attention.
It became a global symbol of American inequality. It wasn't just some local issue.
And the sheer number of lynchings. The article gives an estimate.
Over 4,700 between 1882 and 1968. A staggering number. And these weren't hidden away.
No, they were often public spectacles.
Grotesque spectacles designed specifically to terrorize entire Black communities.
Public. It's almost unimaginable. So these events, as the article says, they force some kind of national reckoning, but the damage to Black communities, that was immense and lasting.
Oh, absolutely. The article talks about deep scars, psychological, social, economic, that persist even today.
Lynching as a tool of terror meant to crush dissent and force control.
Exactly. It created this pervasive fear. It fractured communities, destroyed families, eroded trust. Not just trust between people, but trust in institutions. That suspicion, it can still linger.
And the psychological side, the article mentions generational trauma.
Yes. Heightened stress, chronic psychological distress. And this internalized silence, the difficulty people had and still have in even talking about the pain. It's a deep wound.
Socially, too, it created divisions, insecurities.
And when these horrific events are sort of erased or downplayed in the main historical story, it really impacts a community's identity. The article stresses how important community dialogues are for resilience, for healing.
And economically. You mentioned that earlier.
The article is clear. Lynching led directly to economic disenfranchisement, hindering wealth building, community development. It was another way to maintain powerlessness, contributing to the disparities we still see.
Which brings us to the role of law enforcement and government, or perhaps their failure.
A profound failure. The article is blunt. Law enforcement often facilitated lynchings or just looked away.
Sheriffs, police officers, actually present.
Sometimes present, yes, with tacit approval or even, in some documented cases, active participation. It wasn't just a few bad apples. It was systemic. The legal system offered no protection.
The article mentions intimidation, economic pressure, tactics beyond just violence.
Yes, infiltrating local governments, creating an environment where lynching could happen without consequence. Impunity.
Just staggering impunity. The legal system failing to hold anyone accountable, reflecting this deep indifference, and actual collusion between authorities and lynch mobs.
Documented collusion, yes. A horrifying picture of justice at the time.
But there was resistance. People fought back. The article details that fight, doesn't it?
Yes, and it rightly highlights the early, incredibly brave work of Ida B. Wells.
A journalist and activist.
Tireless. The article emphasizes how she exposed the truth about lynching, the frequency, the brutality, and debunked the racist myths used to justify it. She was a powerful voice demanding change, demanding legal safeguards.
And then the NAACP, founded in 1909, they really organized the fight.
Very much so. Mobilizing communities, lobbying, using the media, pushing hard for change. The article mentions a major campaign in 1918 for federal anti-lynching laws, a huge step. But those laws faced massive opposition, didn't they, in the 1920s, 30s, like the Dyer anti-lynching bill in 1922.
It failed to pass. The article points to political maneuvering, the power of segregationists.
Yes, it shows just how deeply embedded white supremacy was in the political system itself. It's deeply frustrating.
But then the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, that shifted things. The article connects the fight against lynching to the broader struggle for equality.
Absolutely. It became intertwined. Activists weren't just fighting lynching in isolation. They were demanding comprehensive justice, comprehensive civil rights legislation.
So cases like Emmett Till really brought the brutality into focus.
And galvanized the movement, yes. Public perception started to shift. The article notes a growing national awareness of the urgency. And it underscores how effective organized activism was in raising that awareness and eventually influencing policy.
So this history, as horrific as it is, it clearly casts a long shadow. The article connects it directly to contemporary issues.
It really does. It draws parallels between the systemic oppression and fear created by lynching and modern problems like police brutality and hate crimes.
That's quite a connection. Thinking about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the article suggests that resonates with historical mob violence.
The patterns of violence, the impunity, there are disturbing echoes. And the article also points to rising hate crimes against Black Americans, documented by the FBI. It feels like a continuation of that same racial animus.
So understanding this history is fundamental to our current conversations about race and justice.
Absolutely fundamental. The article stresses how today's activists draw on this history. It fuels the push for systemic reform, for accountability, for real equity. Understanding the roots galvanizes the movement.
Which leads to the final part, education and commemoration.
Critically important work. Honoring victims, making sure this history isn't forgotten or sanitized.
The article mentions the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery.
Yes, a very powerful place. Those steel columns, inscribed with the names of victims. It's an unavoidable reminder of the scale of racial terror.
The article says it aims to promote awareness, remembrance, urging people to confront the legacy.
Exactly. It's a space for dialogue, reflection, and hopefully deeper understanding.
And beyond memorials, there are educational programs, community initiatives.
Yes, in schools, universities, but also community-led things like public readings, storytelling, art exhibits. It's about keeping the history alive, acknowledging it, and learning from it.
Passing the lessons on.
And supporting healing within communities. The article suggests that understanding this past, combined with advocating for a better future, is really the only path toward genuine racial harmony and justice.
So we've covered a lot. The origins of lynching, key horrific events like Emmett Till and Scottsboro, the devastating impact, the failures of law enforcement, the long fight against it, its connection to today's issues, and the vital work of remembrance. It's a harrowing history, but truly essential to grasp if we want to move forward.
Which really leaves a question for you, the listener. Thinking about this history, how does it inform the debates about justice and accountability happening right now in America? And maybe more personally, what can individuals, what can you do in your own community to address the lingering effects of this terrible legacy.